This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hey, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. Today I'll be joined by Terry Arko of HASA. We're going to talk about some summertime tips, some things to do to stay safe out there as a pool pro. We also cover some things to expect in the summertime when you transition from spring to summer, and we'll go over that in detail as well. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support. For me, I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. So I'm joined today by Terry Arko of HASA. How you doing, Terry?
Doing fantastic, David. Really good. Good to be on here again. It's been a while.
Yeah, so the season is starting. So all right, it started already for a lot of people. And so I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the common problems in the summer season and the things that the pool pros struggle with out there. So let's get started with, a few things that are on the top of your mind. People may not know this, but you had a pool service route in the San Fernando Valley for many years. And so you're quite familiar with our smoggy hot weather here in Southern California.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I should, let me just correct you real quick on that. It wasn't the San Fernando Valley. It was the San Gabriel Valley.
Okay.
Which we refer to that as the other valley. I guess the people from San Fernando refer to it as the other valley.
Right.
And then if you're in San Gabriel, you refer to San Fernando as the other valley. But I was in the other valley. So in the Pasadena, Arcadia, Monrovia, all that area there, and mostly foothill area. So yeah, I did do pools there. And yes, I am very familiar with the hot and smoggy days. So that was something that I was going to talk about to begin with. We've had an interesting year weather-wise here. I think even California, you had some unusually warm weather earlier than expected. I think a lot of times for there. And it's kind of gone back and forth, rain and then heat and so forth. So a lot of interesting things. And I think that's one thing now that I'm beginning to say, everybody sort of anticipates, Memorial Day is sort of like, that's the day that everything starts kicking in and getting going. But with the weather the way it is, sometimes I think we're not on the same kind of calendar that we used to be a long time ago, because weather can get hot and then it can actually get cool in June too. Even down in Southern California, we get June gloom there sometimes for a week or two, and it gets rather cool. So it's interesting, and all that affects everything that you do. I think the biggest thing for the pool industry, for me, in my experience, is it tends to be either feast or famine, if that's one way you want to look at it, or I guess another way to look at it is kind of I'm right now I'm training to run a 5K in July, and when I first started several months ago, they said that the best way to train is you start out walking, okay, and then when you get to a point and then you run and you start to run, and then you run when you start to feel tired, or you feel like, your body's kind of not doing well or whatever, you stop and you walk some more. And so I think for pool professionals, that's kind of the way it is. We kind of go from walking to running. The running's definitely a lot harder than the walking. And then we have to slow down and walk some more, but then we have to run. And I think seasonally, that's kind of how it goes. We kind of in the off season we're walking, and that's not too bad. And then all of a sudden, boom, we have to start running, and the running is definitely harder. And I think that's the season, and we start to get into the season into summer, and we definitely have to go at a much faster pace. We have to think about a lot more. We have to do a lot more. And I think that's where I see, the challenges. That's where the challenges are. And the challenges also are just what's going on in the pool and the changes in the pool, and I think the biggest one is just the water temperature increasing. That's a very big one. So, and that can be either a result of, maybe the water was down in the 60s or cooler, and then, the season is starting to come. And so customer might have a heater and they want to heat their pool. So that's one thing. And that's going to be a definite change. And, that changes LSI right away. If you consider, if you go 15 degrees, if you change your temperature by 15 degrees, you're changing the LSI by 0.1. So your LSI is going to change just based on temperature, which means, if your temperature was 60, 65 and you're going to go up to 80, 85, whatever, well, your LSI has now gone up by 0.1 just from the temperature. And then, other chemicals that you're going to add, things you're going to add, all these different things will have an effect on the LSI, of course. And that could be an immediate change. But the other thing, just in temperature going up, is what's happening to calcium. So calcium, the cooler the water is, calcium is going to be more soluble. It's in solution, and actually the water is in a little bit of a corrosive state when it's cooler. But once that water begins to heat up, and once you get, you kind of go past that threshold of about 70, 75 degrees, and you're going up more towards 80, say, now your calcium is precipitating as a solid. And as it precipitates as a solid, it also grabs something else that there's plenty of in the water, and something else that begins to move around a little faster as the water heats up, and that's the carbon dioxide or the CO2. And so you've got calcium precipitating, you've got CO2 becoming a lot more active and moving a lot faster. And so the potential for calcium carbonate scale becomes greater and greater as the water heats up, which again is what affects the LSI also. Then you just look at the aspect of, algae. Algae doesn't grow in cool water. It has a very hard time growing in cool water. It's in a spore form. But once that water begins to warm, those spores are going to immediately begin to transfer into the cellular form. They're going to start to multiply. And that's another thing. It's just chemical changes, the changes in the amount of chlorine that are going to be needed immediately. So we always found, springtime is a notorious time for algae as well. We tend to think of algae as being more into the summer maybe, but springtime is definitely another time because you have water warming up. You may still have some spring rain, and that's going to certainly bring nitrogen in. And then you just have an environment where the algae can, double in as little as 8 hours. You can have, the algae multiplying. So I think those are, again, when I say you're going to go from walking to running, you have a lot of this going on. And I think you understand that. You're in the industry. You see these things.
Yeah, I think for me, I look at more like we're kind of coasting on autopilot and neutral, like a Tesla and self-driving. And then all of a sudden, I put my hand in the water and I'm like, hey, this water feels pretty warm. And if you look at your watch and it's like, you see it's like May 1st or around that time. And it's like, oh, wow, I got to start boosting up the chlorine, and I got to start, actually paying attention now to the pool. So
yeah, it is a strange dynamic. Like you said, you're coasting, but then you just got to hop into gear fast because things change so fast. And when you got a route, guess where you're doing 70 pools, 50 pools, I don't know, whatever it is a week. and you're not getting to all those pools on the same day, obviously. And so, you can, when things start heating up, and then it's a week or so before you get to another one. And then, what's the pool like? What's the environment like? What's the backyard like? What's the usage and everything like? A lot of things can happen as we've all experienced.
I think also one of the misnomers of the industry, and a lot of people think this, is that like everyone uses their pool, and so when the summer hits, you're going to have parties, and every single one of your pools is going to be used, and you have to.
Yeah.
It's going to be like a huge amount of work. But in reality, I wouldn't say that's true for all the pools out there, residential wise. Now, if you do commercial pool service, you're in a whole nother world, and you're in a world of hurt because that's the time where they put a brick by the gate and prop it open, and everyone in the whole neighborhood comes in there and goes swimming.
Right.
But I think for residential pools, it's a mix of both. I mean, you have some people that have their pools as decoration, and then you have some people that kill it in the summertime. So it's not like you're scrambling entirely with residential pools. And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description.
Yeah, that can be true. It does differ. The one thing really, though, that I say is, regardless of what the environment or the use of the pool or whatever, as early as you can, and obviously now we've turned the corner past Memorial Day, so things are beginning to ramp up already. We've had incredibly unusually warm, weird weather up here in the Seattle area, but tomorrow temperatures are supposed to drop by almost 20 degrees, and it's going to start raining again. So you always kind of have those things. But some things that I recommend that you start in the spring, and before we get even to what's the first day of summer, June 22nd, whatever, is now, really start. The one thing I recommend a lot is do as many shock treatments now as you can, while the pools aren't being used as much, while the parties haven't kicked in as much and so forth. But, that's one thing. And the other thing is obviously looking at things like where your phosphates are now. Can you deal with phosphates now, kind of getting them lower instead of trying to do that in the summer? And the other thing is, are you using borates? If you're using borates, CYA, borates, all those things like that. Now is the time, I think, to look at those, check on those. Do they need to be topped up? What do you need to do to make those adjustments? And, early spring's ideal, but before we hit that, that summer corner and turn that, any of those things that you can do and check now. If you got to do a little dilution to lower your CYA, now's the time to do it. Just get everything ready and prepared as much as possible before we get into the thick of it, as I like to say. I think that, that's the main thing, really. And I think that's the main thing of what you were saying about, it's like you're coasting and then boom, you're in gear. So is there a way to make an easier transition? And I think the easier transition is when you're still kind of in the coasting, but you're ramping up a little slower than just, hitting the pedal to the metal. And so you're a little more prepared. And definitely, I think just starting to do some proactive shocking. And of course, me, I'm going to recommend liquid is the best. Checking CYA and managing CYA now, checking borates, phosphates, things like that now. Do everything now before the really busy season gets in. And then my feeling is, and it's been my experience when I did pools, the season tends to go a little better because you're not handling some things or you've prepared, you've done a better job preparing for that.
Yeah, I think the season can be much longer when you start off bad.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. The other one that I would say would be also total dissolved solids. I mean, these are all the things, when I did pools, we had a system, and the system was always in early spring. We were testing CYA, we were testing TDS. Of course, we didn't have borates, or we didn't work with borates back then. Didn't know anything about phosphates back then either. But springtime was definitely a time where you managed your CYA, you check the CYA. Do we need to add more? Do we need to drain, maybe reduce some? What do we need to do there? We handle it in the spring. And definitely spring was one of those times where we did the total dissolved solids test. And that was mainly just to see, where's the level at? And do we need to make some adjustments there at that point to get us through the summer so we don't, have an overabundance of TDS when we're trying to or having to add more chlorine, possibly more water balance chemicals, other things, algicides, clarifiers, enzymes, all those things, that we use to troubleshoot in the season. And
I also think the pool pro has to be aware that you're going to spend a lot more money on chemicals in the summer.
Absolutely.
The usage goes up pretty tremendously in some cases.
Yes. Yeah, it absolutely does. And that's another thing in, I guess, business 101 or whatever, is when you're doing your budgets for the year, you need to budget accordingly for the summer and figure you could be using 2 to 3 times the amount of chlorine or chemical. And that goes with anything else. Are you going to need additional water balance, or how much, if you're going to do phosphate removals, or you're going to need algicide, things like that. Yeah, those are all things you need to think about ahead of time and put into your budget for sure.
It seems like every summer the chemicals get, I always thought they were going to just stabilize, but one thing after another right now, the inflation because of the little problem we're having over in Iran is causing, pretty massive inflation. So are chemical costs going to still rise this season?
Yep. Yeah. I think the biggest thing where you see the increase, and the increase is going to come, is just now because of the ridiculous fuel charges, because of what's going on in the world. And, in some cases, transport relies on diesel more so than just regular gasoline. And I don't know if you've looked at the cost of diesel lately, but that has really gone high. And
like $9 here in my area.
Yeah. And so when you're doing transport and your transport relies on that, obviously that increases your cost to deliver goods. And unfortunately, to keep going, that cost has got to get passed on.
Yeah,
So yes, we are seeing that.
And there's all kinds of other costs involved. I mean, here in California, the minimum wage goes up like every year, and there's labor costs that go up. So I always tell people that are always thinking, well, the tablets are going to drop back down to $80 a bucket, 50-pound bucket. The reality is that fuel costs, labor costs, even stuff that we don't even know, like cost of plastic coming from overseas, all goes up every year.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And, I was thinking about something else too, talking about all these things happen that we just have no control over in the world. And it's always going to be that way. We're going to have these emergency situations, and they seem to be coming more and more. But the other thing I think about too, and the other reason that I believe it's good to just be as proactive as you could be, like even now, is because one of the things, as you know, David, that's always going to come up, and in California, certain areas of California, Arizona, once we get into the hotter, drier seasons, the other thing that always tends to come up is drought too. Then all of a sudden we get into a drought because we get into this warm, extended time without any rain. And so, the government agencies or whatever, maybe the local agencies will say, oh, now we have to put drought restrictions in. And that restricts what you can do at the pool too. And that can be some restrictions to draining. So again, that's another reason. If you need to do your drain and dilutes, if you need to, deal with your TDS and your CYAs and all of those things, if you can knock that out early in the season before all that stuff, kind of comes about to where you can't do it, or maybe it's harder to do it, but you've already done it ahead of the game. And so you don't need to worry about it during those. You can get through that time possibly better.
And I think that's logical because a lot of times you start the season and the CYA is at 150 or 180, and draining half the pool before the season starts is much easier than in the middle of summer when you're doing 10 million things and dealing with the heat and other pools and problems. So logically, I think that's smart to do that. And I think customers are more approachable, like right before summer, like, hey, we're trying to get your pool ready for the season. Let's drain, half the water and have some fresh water for the pool season, rather than like, you're in July or August telling the customer you have to drain half the pool. They're like, why? I mean, the summer season's almost over. So it's got to be proactive there. And I think that's also from the overuse of trichlor tablets, which, still to this day, I get people that are like, why is my cyanuric acid going from 50 to 100? What am I doing? And I'm like, well, the tablets have half the weight of cyanuric acid. And they're like totally shocked.
Over half.
They're shocked by that. And it's like, does anyone, the pool store, of course, not telling them that. But
no. And so there's another whole side to this too, on this preparedness thing too. When we get into this, when the heat starts to slam and everything. And that is also, and again, as you point, we talked about it earlier in the beginning here about the hot, being familiar with the hot, smoggy days, and that's taking care of yourself. Just taking care of yourself from the standpoint of keeping cool. That's even a matter of making sure, maybe getting your air conditioning serviced in your truck to make sure that's running properly. So at least you can keep yourself cool between visits to the pool. You can cool yourself down, having, fluids, liquids. And I will say, a big misnomer a lot of times is guys, gals, whatever, and they have a big pitcher of water, just water, and they're just drinking lots of water. But actually if all you're doing is just drinking straight water, that can all actually kind of dehydrate you faster, because straight water is going to dilute out all your electrolytes in your body faster. And so, I say I'm not a big fan of Gatorade necessarily, because Gatorade has a lot of processed sugars and dyes and stuff in it. But you can make your own Gatorade that's much better than that, just by, when you take your jug of water, add some lemon juice, put a teaspoon of salt in there, and you've got your own natural Gatorade, and you drink that, and that's going to replenish your electrolytes and so forth. Or you could also, like Costco's got these, these IV packs, these little packets you can pour in a bottle of water. They get your electrolytes back. Those are much better. So, just kind of keeping tabs on that, on your hydration, obviously on your skin, and, protecting your skin against the sun. HASA, we were at the trade shows, we were giving away, big coolers that you can keep ice and drinks and things like that in. So if you're fortunate enough to win one of those, well, put it to good use. And also, HASA, we give away the neck wraps that you can put in your cooler and keep them cool. And then when you go out, you put that around your neck and, keep your body temperature lower. But I think that's important too, because you don't want to. You get a lot of guys that think, oh, I'm tough. Oh, I can handle it. Oh, I don't need to do this. I've been doing this 20 years or whatever. But you dehydrate and go out and go down on a concrete deck and split your head open. And then you wake up in a hospital. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So also, protecting yourself out there when the season ramps up.
Yeah, and there's a product on Amazon that people can get. I'll refer to them. It's called Trace Mineral. Trace Mineral drops, and you put these in your water, and it's a natural way to kind of refresh your electrolytes besides Gatorade or all that sugar. I don't drink Gatorade because it's like 90% sugar. It's crazy, Well,
and it's not even sugar. It's fake sugar. It's like high fructose corn syrup or something.
Yeah.
It's really bad for you.
You want to, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just saying, like what you said, the mineral drops and things like that. And, the other part of that is that, when you lose electrolytes and when you're dehydrated and all that, you're extremely fatigued. So your energy level just goes way down. And it's as simple as what you're saying, David, with, if you can get these mineral drops, these mineral packs, or just putting a little salt and lemon juice in there or something. And that's going to make you get through the day much more energetically. You're going to be more focused. You're going to have better energy than being all fatigued and wiped out.
Yeah, and the danger of being dehydrated or heat stroke even is that you don't know it until it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had heat stroke, and unfortunately for me, it occurred on a golf course and not while I was working. And it was just because, very hot day and I was not drinking enough, getting enough electrolytes.
Yeah.
And it was not pleasant. So
Yeah. If you're looking for more podcasts, you can find those by going to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com, and clicking on the podcast icon at the banner. That'll take you to a drop-down menu with over 1,900 podcasts. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great week. God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.